Her voice cracked through the phone, not with anger, but with years of buried grief, as she whispered, "I never thought you'd believe me." And just days later, I stood uninvited in my aunt's dining room, holding my grandmother's Bible like a loaded weapon, and read aloud the letter that shattered everything. Faces went pale, forks dropped, and the people who once controlled the story suddenly had no words left. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The air in the attic was thick with the smell of dust, old wood, and time, the kind of place that held its breath long after the people who filled it had gone. I'd come up there with a half-empty heart, thinking I'd just sort through forgotten trinkets and leave with little more than a few photo albums and maybe an antique lamp. But when I tugged aside the moth-eaten curtain that had collapsed over the dresser and saw the glint of aged leather tucked beneath a broken chair, something in me shifted. Grandma Betty's Bible wasn't just old. It was worn, used. The spine was cracked, the edges softened like they'd been thumbed through in moments of both devotion and despair. The silk scarf wrapped around it was one I remembered from childhood, pale blue with little stitched roses. She used to wear it to church on Sundays, tied neatly beneath her chin like a woman from another century. I held it to my nose, hoping to find her perfume still clinging to the fibers, but there was only dust and absence. When the note fell from Psalms and landed like a whisper on my lap, my first instinct was disbelief. A note in Grandma's Bible? It felt like something out of a mystery novel, not real life. But her handwriting was unmistakable, looping and elegant, the kind of cursive no one writes anymore. And the words, they didn't just land, they hit. If you're reading this, then you need to know the truth. I read the sentence again, and again. A heaviness grew in my chest, equal parts dread and confusion. The truth about the house? About why my mother had been cut from the will? I sat back on my heels, eyes fixed on that line like it had just betrayed every family story I'd ever been told. All these years I'd believed my mother had been reckless, that she'd earned her exile from the family with one bad decision after another, running off with my father, blowing through money, alienating her siblings. That's what Uncle Don always said. That's what Aunt Lydia whispered at every holiday dinner. But now there was doubt, thick, undeniable, pressing up against my ribs. Why hide a note like this, unless there was something to hide from? And why had she trusted me to find it? Suddenly, I wasn't just cleaning out my grandmother's house. I was standing on the edge. The cedar chest groaned faintly as I opened it, releasing a breath of cedar and age, like the sigh of something that had waited too long to be remembered. I'd seen this trunk 1,000 times growing up, a mundane fixture in Grandma's bedroom, quietly collecting dust and decades. I used to sit on it as a child while she brushed my hair and told me bedtime stories. I thought I knew what it held: wool blankets, old photographs, maybe a few of Grandpa's war medals. But now it felt like a tomb for secrets, one I was unsealing with shaking hands. I traced the soft velvet lining with my fingertips, unsure what I was even looking for. And then, tucked so precisely along the inner seam that it almost escaped me, I found it. A thin envelope sealed with brittle glue, its edges yellowed and fragile like dried petals. The paper crackled as I turned it over. My name, in ink faded to the color of old bruises. A letter, dated 25 years ago. I was just a baby when she wrote it. Too young to speak, to remember, to even know who I was. But my grandmother, the same woman who made perfect pies and sang hymns in the garden, had written something for me, hidden it away, and trusted that somehow I would find it. And as I slipped the paper from the envelope and unfolded it, the room seemed too still, as if the walls themselves were listening. The words were plain, but they struck with the force of revelation. She confessed that my mother, the woman I had blamed for her own erasure, had been the only one brave enough to speak the truth. My uncles and aunts, the ones who hosted the family barbecues and gave me graduation money in crisp envelopes, had stolen from her. Slowly, quietly, over years. And when my mother discovered it and threatened to expose them, they turned on her like wolves. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. They convinced Grandma to rewrite her will while she was grieving the loss of my grandfather, made her believe that Mom was unstable, that she was dangerous. They painted her as greedy, irrational, volatile, all to protect themselves. And it worked. They rewrote our family's entire narrative with a lie, and I had believed it. I had looked at my mother through their lens and seen a woman who couldn't be trusted, a woman I had grown up resenting. The shame hit first, hot and sour in the back of my throat. Then came the anger, curling in my chest like fire. They didn't just betray her. They stole her dignity. And they stole my right to know her. I didn't knock when I entered my aunt's house. I walked in through the side door like I had 100 times before, though this time I wasn't a guest. I was a witness. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and rosemary, and the laughter coming from the dining room was effortless, polished, like nothing had ever gone wrong in this family. They didn't notice me at first. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, watching the people who had built a fortress of lies around themselves. My Aunt Lydia pouring wine, my Uncle Don carving meat like a benevolent patriarch, the cousins making jokes I no longer understood. It was surreal, like I'd stumbled onto the set of a play where every actor knew their lines except me. Then Lydia saw me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," she said, her tone light but strained. "You should have told us you were coming." I didn't answer. I walked to the center of the room, pulled Grandma's Bible from my bag, and laid it on the table with the care of someone placing a loaded weapon. Next came the letter, unfolded, worn now from being read and reread. The chatter died slowly, unease rippling through the room like a chill. "I found this in Grandma's Bible," I said. My voice didn't shake. "It's addressed to me, from 25 years ago." I started reading, word for word, Grandma's confession, her guilt, her explanation. I watched faces tighten, jaws clench. Someone dropped a fork. My cousin Megan looked like she wanted to disappear. Uncle Don was the first to speak, voice low and rough. "You don't understand. Your mother. She put us in a terrible position. She was going to ruin everything your grandmother built." I turned toward him, slowly. She was going to tell the truth. Silence. Not the kind that hangs gently. This one throbbed. "You let her take the fall. You called her unstable, selfish. You made me believe she was dangerous. All so you could keep bleeding money from someone who trusted you." Lydia opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to make sure no one forgets what you did." The Bible sat like a verdict between us, and for the first time, they all looked smaller. Their perfect world had cracked, and the truth at last had begun to flood in. The fall of the house didn't come with thunder. It came quietly, with documents, bank records, signatures mismatched by shaky hands, and timelines that no longer lined up. The lawyer, a man with silver-rimmed glasses and an iron sense of justice, called me in one afternoon and laid everything bare. The inheritance had been tampered with, digitally altered, coerced under duress. The will Grandma had signed just weeks before her passing wasn't the one she'd written months earlier, the one that left everything to my mother. There were withdrawals traced to Uncle Don's account, property transfers disguised as gifts. Lydia's husband had even siphoned money into an LLC registered out of state. Layer upon layer of fraud, slick, quiet, methodical. They hadn't just stolen money, they'd stolen identity. They'd rewritten the legacy of a woman who'd loved them, and used her silence to punish the only daughter who stood up to them. The case moved faster than expected, maybe because the evidence was so damning, maybe because, deep down, the rest of the world saw what I now did, a family that had mastered appearances, but not decency. The press never caught wind, but inside the community, word spread. Neighbors stopped waving from porches. Church friends stopped calling. Lydia's social calendar evaporated overnight. Don's business lost its biggest clients. There was no screaming, no scandal, just isolation, a quiet undoing that mirrored the way they had isolated my mother. And then there was the house. Grandma's house. Once heavy with the ghosts of secrets and hushed betrayals, now it felt breathable. My mother walked through the rooms like someone reclaiming something more than real estate. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She opened windows. She ripped down curtains. She scrubbed years off the walls with a kind of grace that made me want to weep. I helped her repaint the living room. We chose warm colors, muted amber and soft cream. She laughed when she spilled a whole tray of paint down her pants and didn't apologize for it. There was a looseness in her shoulders I hadn't seen since childhood photographs. Some afternoons I visit the house alone. I sit on the porch swing with a mug of coffee and the Bible in my lap. The pages are still fragile, still creased with memory, but they hold something new now. Testimony. Not just of faith, but of a woman's quiet resistance. Of a truth buried and unburied. That Bible isn't scripture anymore. It's justice, bound in leather, written in trust, and opened at last.